Falcha Huladunya. I wanted to make a short video to share about an upcoming in-person Scottish Gaelic language and culture learning group that's starting this September 2023 in the Cowichan Valley here on Vancouver Island. Before I begin, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional and unceded territories of the Cowichan First Nation. There is no treaty here. These lands have been stolen, and I think that it's important as somebody who identifies as a Gael to acknowledge these traditional lands and the care that's been taken of these lands since time out of mind by the ancestors and by the first people who live here today. So, to introduce myself, smisha charloch machina nian chlúfach ikian hamish chulgor mechgaif. The name of my people comes from the place we came from, which is Chir Culgor, the lands of Kilgore, which is now called Falkland, Fife. My journey into Gaelic language and culture grew out of my desire to engage in decolonization and reconciliation with local First Nations people, specifically the Cowichan Mustimuch, because it's on their traditional and completely unceded territory that I'm living. Several years ago, I asked an elder from the Snuneymuxw First Nation about how I could get started on this journey of decolonization and reconciliation. She began by asking me who my people were. I told her that as far as I knew, I was a mix of Scottish, Irish, Nordic, German, French, and English people. She asked me if I had any of my ancestral languages. I told her that I didn't. So her advice to me was that I needed to start there. To paraphrase, what she suggested was, it sounds like you need to do some reconciliation with your own people before you try to reconcile with mine. My exploration began with simple ancestry and history. I did the DNA tests. I did the family trees. Then I did some animist training with Daniel Fuhr in ancestral lineage healing, and I connected very strongly with my mother's father's lineage, the Kilgores. Daniel pointed me to Professor Michael Newton's Hidden Glen Folk School. Michael's an internationally recognized and lauded scholar in Celtic studies who specializes in Gaelic history, language, and culture. I completed a course at the Hidden Glen called Radicalizing the Roots that focused on the impacts of the materialist, modernist, imperialistic, Anglo-centric colonial project on the Gaelic peoples, lands, and culture of Alba, what is known as Scotland. And that impact has been nothing short of genocidal. The parallels to what's happened and is still happening here on Turtle Island were so clear that it's obvious to me that the form of colonialism that was brought here was shaped and essentially beta tested in the Gaeltacht, the Highlands of Scotland, at the expense of the Gaelic peoples, as well as in Erin, Ireland. I wanted to learn more about the story and traditions of my own Gaelic ancestors. I wanted to take more courses at the Hidden Glen, but one thing really stood out to me. Because English was my only language, I was totally limited in what I could read and understand of the stories and history of my ancestors. So much has been written by Gaelic people about our history that's never been translated into English. And beyond that, so many concepts and expressions within the language are so rooted in Gaelic culture that there's actually no effective translation for them, and much of the meaning is lost when translation is attempted. So I decided that if I really wanted to understand my ancestors, their stories and their culture, what I needed to do first was to learn the language and to learn it fluently. so I got started. Like so many people of the Gaelic diaspora, I started with the Duolingo app. Early on, I was also lucky enough to come across a book called Fluent Forever by Gabriel Weiner, which outlines a powerful way to approach language acquisition that involves first making and then using multimedia flashcards using a program called Anki. But that was nearly 3 years ago. Last September, I enrolled in the Level 3 Gaelic online course with Cowichan na Gàidhlig in Nova Scotia, and I'm continuing with Level 4 this year. I still consider myself a learner, I always will, but even so, I am now partially fluent, and I've been encouraged by my own teachers to start supporting others in their Gaelic learning journeys as a way of continuing and enriching my own. At the beginning of the summer of 2023, a friend shared a poster advertising a local Scottish Gaelic conversation group, so I called about it, and that's where I met Brian. Brian had started learning Gaelic on Duolingo too, but was finding it unsatisfying and was looking for other learners to connect with to practice speaking. We got together to explore what we could put together and offer, and so this is what I have in mind. For me, Gaelic is part of a much bigger picture than just being able to ask where the bathroom is or being able to order a meal in a restaurant. It's about much more than being able to make a toast at a burn supper or at the Highland Games. It's about reclaiming my beautiful ancestral culture and supporting other people who want to do that too. So what I'd like to do is to explore Gaelic language together in the context of traditional cultural practices. I'd like to explore some of the significant differences between the Gaelic worldview and the currently dominant Anglocentric, modernist, colonial worldview. These differences include things like relationship with the land, orientation in and to the world, expressions of color and emotion, as well as the organization and understanding of relationships in family and in community. And these things aren't separate from language learning. In fact, having a fundamental understanding of these cultural views will greatly support and enable your language learning. 2 years ago, the Cowichan elder to Selim, Ron George, gave a talk on the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation in which he emphasized that language and culture are not two separate things, but that culture is embedded in language and that language carries a culture forward. I found that to be absolutely true. What I envision is essentially a céilidh, a Gaelic community gathering, in which we will be sharing poems and songs and stories, music, maybe even food and drink. We'll explore mythology and history and cultural protocol, and we'll be learning Gaelic words and phrases in the context of the seasons and both historical and current events. We'll also be practicing speaking in Gaelic as much as each of us is able to do. I can also offer some guidance and advice on deepening your learning journey in Gaelic based on my own knowledge and experience. And I'll share what resources and connections I have to the broader Gaelic community to support you. Experience is not required. There's a saying, Ishear Gaelic vriste na Gaelic ansa chiste, which means better broken Gaelic than Gaelic in the casket, or better broken Gaelic than dead Gaelic. Another saying is that perfection is the enemy of progress. Everyone is welcome. Gaelic language and culture is open to anyone that sincerely wants to uplift and uphold it. If you're interested in finding out more, or if you'd like to participate, you can find me on Facebook, Eshu Martin, or you can message me, or you can email me at eshu@monarchtranswork.com. You can also ask any questions or make comments in the comment section below. I'll put all of my contact information in the video description. Please give a thumbs up to this video and share it with your friends and anyone else you feel would be interested. Ta po life.